And we bow and we bend from the beginning of the world till the never end. O Devo Shalom Aleinu, O Devo Shalom Aleinu, Devo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Hi, welcome everybody. Last week we had a baby. We're doing things backwards, I guess. Tonight we're going to get married. So let's take a look and we'll make it all happen. So hold on for a second. All right, very good. Now we're going to share.
Oops, I got to make you share. I got to let you share. I'm behind, Neil. Here, hang on.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. Neil. Yes. Okay, now you can share.
Okay, there we go. Very good. Okay. Pretty, huh? This is, you can see it. Yes, I hope?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So this is an old medieval Jewish wedding ring. You can see that it's built like a home in a sense, or it's built like a castle, a mansion actually. And there's several reasons for that. One of them is that for the Jewish community, having been, under oppression for a long time, during the Middle Ages, we got to the point that because the Catholic Church said we couldn't own property, we decided to refute that in a sense, or deal with that by making all our assets liquid. And one of the things that people would gather would be jewelry. And so they would make these very, wonderful pieces for their families. And in a sense, saying something nasty through this beautiful piece to the people who used to come in and take their property, which were usually overlords, lords of various places who wanted to build a castle. So we put castles on them, and you could put various things in them. You could even use them for Havdalah, put the spices in here at the end for Shabbat. The other thing that happened, though, is that these rings would often be used by the community at large, so that every bride got married with this ring, and then she was given a ring by her groom. And if one was worth a little bit less than the next, they all got to use this one. So that was kind of an equalizer for all the brides who got to use this beautiful ring. Now, this ring is ornate. It does have some ivory on it, which is kind of rare. It is gold, as you can see. It didn't need to be worth much, but the rabbis, my ancient colleagues, were judges and not jewelers. And so as a result, they wanted the ring to be pretty plain and simple. And that's what it grew to after this time. But at this time, it was pretty ornate, but it usually didn't have any precious metals on it. Precious stones on it, because the rabbis, again, just didn't know how much those jewels were worth, and they wanted to be sure that the ring was actually worth a certain amount. Okay. So that preceded the wedding with, and was shortly, in other words, the groom would come to the bride. He'd bring with him two witnesses. They would then go, he would bring two witnesses. He would give her the ring, and he would actually say the wedding vow, which we'll see later. Behold, with this ring, you are consecrated, you are made holy for me, according to the laws of Moses and the Jewish people. And the two friends who would see it would then become the witnesses for this document, which is a ketubah, right? A Jewish marriage document. These are old ones. If I didn't tell you this one was from Persia, I'll bet you could guess because it sort of looks like the style of rug you may have in your house if you're lucky enough to have a Persian rug. Really quite dramatic and quite wonderful. Sometimes the colors are like those rugs all over the place and really, really beautiful. Um, and you can see how old it is because it's on parchment. Why are these documents illuminated? Well, they are illuminated because the text itself, here and here, this text is exactly the same, except for the dates, the place, and the names of the bride and groom. That's it. Everything else is exactly the same. These are legal documents that for the Jewish community uh, um, record the wedding. Long before there was the state of California and county courts that issued wedding licenses, the Jewish community wanted to do that to ensure that all children were born into a family that had both husband and wife, and that there was responsibility taken on mostly by the husband for the family and the wife. So this document says that the groom paid a certain amount to it's gonna sound it's not purchase, but it is he's acquired the rights to have this woman be his wife, and he alone, that no one else could share that with him. But again, the language is exactly the same. It's in Aramaic, and it's a legal document for the community to ensure that they know that this couple is indeed married. Now, of course, you can see that depending where you were, these are from the same century and about 50 years apart, but you can see that the artwork is really quite different. And so the artwork would always reflect where the people are. This is a more contemporary one that you can see. This language is going to be different, though. This is in Hebrew. And of course, in the other ones, there wasn't any English, but we make sure that it's in English as well. And I don't know if I can make this larger for you. Did that work? Somebody tell me if it worked. Yes? Okay. So this part over here is going to be just about the same, right? For every single ketubah that we have, that again records the time, the place, the date and the place, and the couple's names, and their parents' names, as you can see. This is a new document. As you can see, it talks about supporting each other and striving to show sensitivity to each other's needs, and so on and so forth. This is about the emotional relationship that they have, and that's what binds them together rather than any kind of a contract or a physical, a monetary relationship. So this is really quite different, and the Orthodox will not use this. The Orthodox will not use this. The Reform community will definitely use this. Some conservative Jews will use this, but most will use something that still kind of echoes back to that traditional document, it's a little bit more stringent than the Reform one. Oops, didn't want to do that. I wanted to show you that this is a paper cut, what you were just seeing. I hope you can see. It's hard to see the 3D, but please believe me, this is indeed a paper cut done with a laser. Used to be done just with a scalpel of some sort, a very, very sharp blade. And this is a wonderful technique that people use for making a ketubah. Ours was a silk screen, actually, and the artist, ours meaning my wife and myself, the artist not only mixed the inks himself, but he made the paper. So it was, this raw paper with these raw edges, and it really still is exquisite. It's a piece of art in our home. And this is a marvelous process, really, that Jewish couples go through today when they're not using, when most of the, well, except for the Orthodox, when non-Orthodox Jews search for a ketubah, they're searching for artwork and text that represents them, that they will sign. They will have two witnesses sign, um, uh, and they'll put it like as a piece of art in their home. It's really pretty amazing to see this when you walk into a Jewish home. You may have seen it. Some people don't have something so elaborate. It'll be a small little document in a desk drawer somewhere, but people are really getting into and have for many decades these beautiful ketubot that you actually hang like art in your home. The witnesses, um, the requirements for the witnesses goes back to the Orthodox document. The Orthodox document has only two spaces at the bottom for people to sign, just the witnesses. And as I just told you, those witnesses are the witnesses that would come to the door for the ring to be exchanged. That's the engagement process. That is the engagement process when that happens. And the ketubah, the marriage document, like a prenup, is written out right away. They run to the scribe and have the scribe create the document. The scribe they can have it illuminated later, they can have it decorated later, but the document itself will be written right away, and the two witnesses will sign. The witnesses that saw the ring being accepted by the potential bride. So now they're engaged. And that, by the way, makes the engagement so strong that it takes a Jewish divorce to undo it. So they're legally bound to each other at this point. They just haven't had a ceremony yet. In Eastern Europe, before the war, that would happen the wedding itself would happen about a year after the engagement. The witnesses were required to be at least as distant from the bride and the groom as non-blood relatives. They could, of course, be friends. They could be, your aunt Sophie, who is married to your uncle Jake, but Jake is family. Jake is blood family. She married into the family. But of course, for the Orthodox, they won't have Sophie do it. If Jake was married to Sophie and Sophie was blood, then Jake could do it. They'll only have men do it. Sometimes in Reform documents, we'll actually have several witnesses, even beyond the customary two, to witness this. These can be the same or different than the ones who sign the county license. Oops. Okay. I just wanted to show you this one because this is another nice document. It has the two rings intertwining. That's a very common theme for ketubot. At the top, it has this. Why can't I see my? I can't. It's up. Well, at the top in the bold Hebrew letters, it says "Ani ledodi v'dodi li." I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine. That is frequently the phrase you will see on a Jewish wedding ring, so it's frequently on a ketubah as well. It's from the book, The Song of Songs, which we've talked about before, as one of those strange books in the Bible that really doesn't mention God, but instead is this love poetry between this man and his lover. So you'll notice here too that one side is the Hebrew and one side is the English. That's a very common dynamic in ketubah making today. Ours is a butterfly, and half of the butterfly is the Hebrew and half of the butterfly is the English. And I wanted to show you this one so that you could really, let's see if my mouse is not working. Why is my mouse not working? There it goes. Okay, because it's actually a video, and it kind of takes you through the ketubah. Here, this tree is like the tree of life, right? And it has these deep roots. In the Mishnah and the Talmud, there's a wonderful image that's used for what kind of person you should be, and you should be a person with deep roots, and whoops, went too far, with deep roots, and not too much foliage at the top. So if the wind, and if you're by the water and the wind comes, that even though the land is softer, the soil is softer, you will stay rooted. The roots are learning, and the foliage is your good deeds in the world. And much better to have good learning, because it grounds you, and you will indeed have many, many, many good deeds that come from that. Okay. So the next thing we need to talk about is what happens next, which is the mikvah. Here's a very pretty image of someone in the water, in the position that she should be in the mikvah. Now the mikvah is the ritual bath that is very, very old in Jewish tradition. In fact, for those of you who've been to Israel, or know about Israel, know about Masada, where the Jews made their last stand against the Romans after the destruction of the Second Temple, about the year 73 or 75, or 73 to 75 or so. They made their last stand, but when their defeat was inevitable, they all committed suicide, and rather than have themselves and their children enslaved to the Romans. But nonetheless, the reason I bring that up is because they found a mikvah up there when the Jews overtook what was actually a Roman governor's retreat, in case he needed to retreat from a revolt. So the Jews took it over and built a mikvah, and the rabbis, once the rabbinic authorities were told there's a mikvah up there, of course they came to check, and it's kosher. So it is actually a functioning mikvah that people can use. Here is a more standard view of what a mikvah looks like. You can see that it's this wonderful pool of water. Why my mouse is not functioning. Let me see if there's something I can do to get it working. Well, something happened. The mikvah, very strange. So the mikvah, it has these 7 steps that go down into it. There's that number 7 again. And the person immerses, like this woman did, in essentially a fetal position. This is usually something that brides will do before their wedding. Women will also do it every time their menstrual cycle ends. People will do it, women will do it after they've given birth. People, men and women, will do it after a trauma or after an illness. They'll come to the mikvah for a sense, in a sense, a rebirth. The fetal position is important, not because she's rebirthing, but rather because it exposes most of the body. At a given point, she's going to let go of her legs, actually, and spread out her hands and spread out her toes as much as she can, so that she is completely immersed in the water. There are witnesses above her who are going to make sure that all of her hair is in the water as well. Now, this is the mikvah up at the University of Judaism, the American Jewish University, which is up on Mulholland. Let's see, I'm trying to do this for you, and I just can't. Does this get bigger? No, I guess it will. Okay, these women over here in the bottom left-hand corner are the women who run the mikvah, and they are absolutely just just amazing. Here is a woman, and you can see she's completely naked, and she has to be, no jewelry, no makeup, no nothing. They make this mikveh look and feel much more like a spa. It really, really does. And here's a woman in this upper right-hand corner. She's just relaxing after being in the water, and again, that can be at any moment, but one can imagine what it feels like if one goes in there before your wedding, and it's really quite beautiful. By the way, men do too, but for the most part, the mikveh is a woman's vehicle for spiritual cleanliness. It's not for literal physical cleanliness. This part of it over here in the corner, this part at the upper right is a bear. It's the receptacle for another body of water. The definition of a mikvah is that it must be living water, which was very difficult in urban settings and settings that weren't near water. So the rabbis had to figure out some kind of a walk around in order to do this. So the water in the lower receptacle, the big one, the one that you can see where the water is, that's regular LA water, LA City water. Under the wooden slats, there's a whole other receptacle for water that was brought to the mikvah in ice from the mountains. And that's a pure rain source rather than from the wells underneath Los Angeles. And so that is brought, and then the ice, of course, melts and it becomes room temperature. And over in the middle, you can't see it, but over in the middle, there is what's called a Nishikawa, which means a kiss. And it's a plug that you unplug, that the participant in the mikveh ritual goes into the water, pulls the plug so the water start intermingling, and then closes it before she leaves or he leaves, but usually she. Okay, there, very pretty. Oops, I don't know why that happened. I'm trying this for you, people. I really am. And there, okay. So now we're at the wedding itself. Now, I gave you this picture of people dancing. Usually when you look this up, you're only going to find men dancing or women dancing. So here's a picture of men dancing. These are more traditional things that we're talking about. They sometimes occur at a progressive wedding, but usually for a traditional wedding. This is a gathering of all the friends and relatives of the man. It's the man over in the bottom left-hand corner who's sitting on a chair. You may think it's the one who's on somebody else's shoulders, but they're just enjoying themselves. And Tisch means table, as you may know, in German and in Yiddish. And the Tisch, there was a point when they were sitting at a table, and they were sitting at the table so that the groom could expound on the weekly Torah portion. And of course, what would happen, well, not of course, but what happens at a Tisch is that his friends constantly interrupt him, and they start singing and they start dancing. And so he never really gets to finish. And it's just this wonderful spoof of him. And it's kind of like a roast of the groom. And it's a beautiful, beautiful evening. Now, there's one going on for the woman as well at this time. Sometimes, as you can see, people are involved in this before the wedding. They're not dressed formally yet. So this will be a separate event. Sometimes it happens right before the wedding. And if it happens right before the wedding, the next thing that happens is a bedecken. Part of a traditional Jewish ceremony when the groom symbolically checks under the bride's veil to make sure he's marrying the right person, an allusion to accidentally marrying Leah instead of Rachel in the Torah. Okay, so this is a story you may or may not remember, so I'll review it really quickly. Jacob, the third generation of the patriarch of the third generation of the Jewish people, was indentured in a sense to his father-in-law in order to marry the woman of his dreams, who was Rachel. So it's actually his cousin, but people did marry cousins in those days. So he worked for her for 7 years. And finally, it was the wedding night. But Rachel was the younger daughter. So the father-in-law, the uncle, Lavan, substituted his older daughter, Leah, instead. He got Jacob nice and drunk and put Leah into the tent. And whether or not he was awake enough to have sexual intercourse or not, it didn't matter. In the ancient world, if people knew that you were in a tent together overnight, you were considered to be married, just in case any children came of that being together. And so Leah became his wife. He said to his father, but you were supposed to give me Rachel. And he said, well, if you want her, you'll have to work for me for another 7 years, which he did. And so one reason that we put for the veiling is that it is an allusion to this substitution of Leah. He didn't accidentally marry her. He married her because of his father-in-law cheating him. But nonetheless, that's one of the reasons. The other reason, as you can see at the bottom, the veiling relates that when Rebecca saw her bridegroom Isaac, that's the second generation of the Jewish people, coming toward her, she took her veil and covered herself, meaning that in that day she was already wearing a veil, like many Muslim women do today, and then she pulled it so that it would cover her entire face. All right, this is kala is the word. Oh, look, it's working again. Kala is the word for bride. And you'll see that in this ceremony, the bride is coming in with her father and mother. That is very, very common in a Jewish processional. Now, processionals, by the way, are very uncommon in Israel. In Israel, people will put up the chuppah, put up the marriage canopy, which we'll see in a second, and everybody gathers around and they do the wedding. And that's how it used to happen in Europe as well before the war. But in America, we, saw this custom of a procession and we sort of liked it. So we did it, but we do it, our way. So you should know that if you see little stick figures with the preferred version of a Jewish processional in Bride's magazine, it doesn't mean anything because there really is no procession and we can do whatever you want. It's not uncommon also for the groom to come in with his parents. Usually it's going to be in the reverse order, of course, that the groom will come in first at some point during the wedding, and the bride will come in later. Now, when they get to the chuppah, they will, the traditional custom is the bride, as you can see on the left, circling around the groom 7 times. And this is not to demonstrate what you are thinking, if I can read your minds, because a lot of people think that it's showing her subservience to her husband. It is not. It is showing her willingness to take care of him and protect him. Now, that's a little bit better, but most couples that I work with, if they're going to opt for the circling, which within progressive ceremonies is an option, it's not something that every couple does, you can also see the groom going around the bride. But rather than him going around her 7 times, which could take a long time, she'll go around the groom 7 times, he'll go around the bride 7 times, then they'll take hands, kind of do a do-si-do, and then step under the chuppah, the marriage canopy. So this is a marriage canopy waiting for a couple to come in. And you can see that it is self-standing. It doesn't have to be. You can actually have some people holding it. The material that's used doesn't matter. It does have to have 4 open sides, however. It can't be a gazebo, and it can't be like a shell. It can't be something that's already standing. It needs to be something that's created for the couple. There's a couple of reasons for the openness. One is a fertility wish for the couple so that they can see out the sides and see to the stars, which was the symbol that God used for Abraham, telling him that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. And the other reason for the 4 open sides is you can see that the chuppah is tent-like. It often will have a piece of cloth at the top. It could be a talit from the family, a talit that someone used and they've died, and this way they can be represented at the wedding. So it could be your grandmother's favorite tablecloth. It could be some other piece of cloth that was very significant to the family in some way. It could be a couple of pieces that are either tacked together, sewn together, or something. You can create your own. I know a woman that she actually crocheted her own chuppah, a lot of work, but you can see how big it is. I've known of couples that will take silk, little pieces of silk, and send it out to people. And they decorate it with silk pens, and then they send it back and someone quilts it together for them. So there's lots of different ways to create a chuppah. The chuppah is tent-like because it represents the very first Jewish home, which was the tent of Abraham and Sarah. And just like Palestinians are today, pardon me, in the ancient world, everybody was hospitable like that, and everybody had the flaps of their tents open to the 4 directions of the wind. And so we want that for this couple too. We want them to have an open home that will welcome people, just like Abraham and Sarah did. Here's just another picture of a chuppah, and you can see this one's being held by 4 honored guests. This is a more progressive wedding, so it's being held by women. That usually will not happen at an Orthodox wedding. Now, this is a lovely wedding happening at night. You can see, I don't know if you can see it close enough, but yes, you can. Now you can. In the rabbi's hand is a Havdalah candle. My gosh, that could be me. I don't think it is, but no, I don't have that much on the top of my head. Okay, but nonetheless, he's holding a Havdalah candle so that this is a ceremony that is a wedding ceremony that's going to begin right after Shabbat. We traditionally do not do weddings on Shabbat, so it is a nice thing to begin the wedding with Havdalah, the ceremony that ends Shabbat. It also creates great imagery for the ceremony, the wedding ceremony, because Havdalah, as you may remember about Shabbat, is a ceremony. Havdalah means separation. So it's not only a separation of the Sabbath from this new week that's about to be upon us, but also one era of the couple's lives ending and another one just about to begin. Now, this scene you may recognize. This is from Fiddler on the Roof. And you may not remember, but that wedding that happened in Fiddler on the Roof happened at the end of Shabbat, happened at the end of the Sabbath. And they all brought their Havdalah candles with them there. they sort of fudged it in the movie a little bit. They didn't do the whole Havdalah ceremony and everybody dousing the candles, but it was really quite spectacular when everybody came with their Havdalah candles. Now, there are two opportunities for a kiddush, for a toast at the wedding. You remember I told you towards the beginning of our gathering together tonight that when the bride accepts this ring from the groom, they are engaged. So we actually have one of these cups for a toast to their engagement and another one that toasts their wedding, their marriage to one another. So they're almost married, but they're not quite married when they have the just that exchange, not exchange, an acceptance of rings. Well, that's an important thing to point out too, that traditionally only the bride gets a ring, not the groom. That is much more of a modern concept that we have. And technically, by the way, it could be anything of value that the groom gives to the bride for her to keep. Doesn't have to be a ring, but it came to be a ring, which has a long tradition in Judaism as it does in other cultures as well. And this little package in the middle, again, it's not working. Oh, it's probably the picture. Okay, this little package in the middle is holding a glass that will be smashed later by the groom. Oops, didn't want that. Okay. Now, this is if it's traditional, this was the vow that the man said when she accepted the ring. But today it's done under the wedding canopy. So there are actually two ceremonies that happen under the wedding canopy: the engagement, just a nod to the engagement, and then the wedding itself. So here's the engagement part. Behold, with this ring, you are consecrated unto me as my husband, as my wife, according to the laws of Moses. It should be and the Jewish people, not in the Jewish people. This is not to have to hold, to love, and to do dishes. This is not till death do you part. This is different. This is a legal ceremony, right? You are consecrated to me. We are now a couple in the eyes of the traditions of the Jewish people and the laws of the Jewish people and in the community of the Jewish people. Everybody knows that we are married and that we have those marriage responsibilities to one another and to our children, which doesn't mean that Judaism doesn't allow for divorce, which we'll talk about a little bit later. All right, and so what follows right after this are the 7 blessings. Now, these 7 blessings actually are the mechanism that makes the wedding happen. It makes the wedding active. These 7 blessings are also said traditionally for the week following the wedding at every meal at which the couple gathers. So there will be guests coming for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they'll say the 7 blessings at the end of every meal. As I often say at a wedding, the wedding ceremony, the wedding blessings, these 7 blessings, there's the number 7 again, by the way, the 7 blessings harken back to the very first 2 people who fell in love on this planet. Not the first Jews, but the first people. It really is very, very deep and very rooted in who we are as Earth people, humans. Now, this is a modern translation, a progressive translation, not by me, but by a great poet whose name is Danny Siegel. And he really is a wordsmith and has great ways of saying things and expanding what the Hebrew said. Because the Hebrew, for instance, at the beginning literally says, Praised are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who brings forth fruit from the vine. Okay? We acknowledge the unity of all, expressing our appreciation for this wine, symbol and aid of our rejoicing. A little bit more understanding injected into the translation, but it certainly gets the sense of the translation and takes it like, I don't know, taffy and pulls it. We acknowledge the unity of all, that realizing that each separate moment and every distinct object points to and shares in this great oneness, which is exactly what the Hebrew says. We acknowledge the unity of all, recognizing and appreciating the blessing of being human, not Jewish, human. We acknowledge the unity of all, realizing the special gift of awareness that permits us to perceive this unity and the wonder we experience as a man and as a woman joining together to live as one. May rejoicing resound throughout the world as the homeless are given homes, as persecution and oppression cease, and all people, I usually say all living things, learn to live in peace with each other and in harmony with their environment. From the source of all energy, we call forth an abundance of love to envelop this couple. May they be for each other lovers and friends, and may their love partake of the same innocence, purity, and sense of discovery that we imagine the first couple to have experienced. And then, the final blessing. We acknowledge the unity of all. We highlight today joy and gladness, bridegroom and bride, delight and cheer, love and harmony, peace and companionship. May we all witness the day when the dominant sounds in Jerusalem, it doesn't add this phrase traditionally, but we do now, and throughout the world, will be these sounds of happiness, the voices of lovers, the sounds of feasting and singing. Praised is love, blessed be this marriage. May the bride and bridegroom rejoice together. So that makes a wedding happen. Okay, that's how important these 7 blessings are. Sometimes the rabbi will chant them. Sometimes other people will be called up to do them, either in Hebrew or in English or both. Sometimes people will not come up, but they'll just pop up amongst the gathered throng and do their part of the blessings. Oops. There's those 2 cups again, because after that we have the 2nd cup. Now, these are 2 couples. Yes, we do same-gender weddings. Those of us who are liberal can choose to do same-gender weddings. That was a decision we made many, many years ago. I've only done a couple, but it's really been wonderful. At the end of the wedding, it's a beautiful tradition to wrap both members of the couple in a talit, usually the talit that one of them is wearing, for the final blessing, which is the priestly blessing, the blessing that you know from your tradition too. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord's countenance shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord give you strength and grant you peace. So that blessing is what the rabbi or the officiant, by the way, it does not have to be a rabbi. It does not have to be somebody licensed by the state of California, even for a day, but it does not have to be a rabbi for us. Rabbis are teachers, scholars, but they are not seen as go-betweens between the community and the divine, nor are they seen as official officiants, as it were. So both of these couples are wearing that talit. And then, of course, we smash a glass, which you've probably seen. These 2 guys are, the 3 people got very, very excited about smashing the glass. The glass, here's what we think it goes back to. It is not what people say about brokenness and wholeness and so on and so forth in that general sense. It's a little more specific than that. Breaking a glass scares away evil. It makes a loud noise. It scares away evil. That's one superstition that the Jewish people grew up with from the Middle Ages. Um, uh, Probably a little bit before, but certainly during the Middle Ages. That's why on old, you know, Errol Flynn movies, you see him, you know, at the end with a big turkey leg and and some, you know, something to drink, and we don't know what's in there. And he gets so drunk that he takes his glass and smashes it against the fireplace. The reason he does that is because his reflexes and his defenses are down now, and he can't literally defend himself against evil. So if there's any evil hanging around, he wants to scare it away. The other reason is this, though, is and this one I like better, and this one is more whole, I think. It's a remembrance of the destruction of the first and second temples in Jerusalem. Um, uh, and uh, the, the reason is because there's strength in this couple. And just like any nation anywhere in the world, this certainly happened in Germany after World War II and other countries in World War II. It certainly happened in Japan after World War II, that it takes individual households to rebuild a people. And that's part of what's going on here. And then you can take the shards of the glass. People do this now, and they make mezuzah for your doorpost, if you remember what that is. That includes the words of the Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, and the paragraphs that follow. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. But they can also take the shards of the glass and make a mezuzah for the couple. It's very lovely. And of course, they'll color some of them, and it's really quite great. And that's it for tonight. That's how we are.
You go. All right. Okay. All right. Well, we
You're
still,
married. Mazel tov.
yeah, we have, congratulations. Finally made it legal. Okay. So many traditions are the same, as you know, Neil, and
Yep.
they kind of feed each other. And and most of the worst traditions have nothing to do with Christianity or Judaism. So it's
The worst?
worse, have nothing to do with our faith traditions. But is the bride always in white?
The bride is traditionally in white. Yes, that is for purity. It's also traditional, by the way, for the bride to fast all day before the wedding. So, and the reason that we wear white on Yom Kippur, if you remember, is to imitate death, but getting pulled back from the brink. And in a sense, she gets that as well.
And what about second and third marriages? Would they be in the same ceremony?
Does she also wear white? Is that what you asked?
Oh, just would would there be any difference in the ceremony if it's
If it's a second marriage or third, no difference at all. Sometimes I'll do a revow with people, right? But and then I have to change the words to present tense and rather than future tense. Um, but no, if it's a second wedding or a third wedding, it's exactly the same. Judaism does allow for divorce. Holiness really is the term. A holy state of being is the term for marriage. And sometimes people don't experience holiness anymore, and they need to go their separate ways. And so that's considered actually a positive thing within the Jewish community, rather than they stay together when there's nothing holding them there. So.
Cool. And all right, any questions folks have tonight?
Have people been to a Jewish ceremony? Jewish wedding? Yeah. That's fun. The Persian ones are great. The Persians come dancing down the aisle, you know. My one of my good friend's sons is married to a Persian woman, and he said, "I don't dance like a Persian." And they said, "Just pretend that you're unscrewing light bulbs and you'll be great. And move around and go like this." So, but the Persian weddings now not only have an aisle for the couple and others to walk down, it's a runway, like at a fashion show. It's really, it's really quite tremendous. Really quite tremendous.
Okay, Rabbi Neil,
Yeah.
I have a question about any kind of prenuptial counseling before the wedding, if that's required or suggested.
It's not required, and it's certainly not required traditionally. There isn't anything in there for that. In fact, a lot of these couples traditionally were put together. They were put together by a matchmaker, and or by their parents, who would make a match. So no, there wasn't. Traditionally, there's no counseling today. Many rabbis will participate in some of these programs that are put together that have a marriage counseling kind of regimen that people go through. Several sessions with the clergy person, but there isn't anything specifically Jewish about it. I try to be really careful. There have been a couple of couples that I didn't really think should get married. And of course, there were couples that I thought that should get married, and they told me later they didn't work. So it's really not up to me. What I can tell them is traditional models for a good relationship, and I often talk about that.
All right.
Thank you. What was my other question? How about interfaith weddings? Interfaith,
Well, obviously the Orthodox won't do it.
No.
The Orthodox won't do it at all. And if you watch Sex and the City, you remember that, what was her name? I can't remember her name. The one who was a museum director. Anyway, she converted to Judaism, and the rabbi was very stringent about it. He actually slammed the door in her face 3 times, and she came back the 4th time. And she said, "Why did you just slam the door?" He said, "Because now I know that you're committed, and so that you're not just doing it to get married, that this is really something that you want to do for yourself." So if the rabbi finds out that someone wants to convert for the sake of marriage, they won't do it. That's Orthodox. Conservative rabbis will still not do a marriage between a Jew and a non-Jew. About 50% of progressive rabbis of one ilk or another will either do them or consider doing them, depending upon the circumstances. I do it, but it took me a long time to get there. Out of rabbinical school, I don't know what it was like for the pastor in seminary, but it's kind of cloistered. The opinions kind of circle in on themselves, and it took really getting to know real people and real people in love and who built a relationship and wanted to build it further. I'll certainly marry a couple that intends to create a Jewish household, even if the non-Jew isn't Jewish, him or herself. So.
Neil, it's interesting. I come to weddings with a prejudice that I guess has worn off a bit, but even my experience is that folks of different religions and even different branches of Christianity, if they tell you they're going to each keep up their own, it's unlikely to happen.
If they're going to keep their own, it's not likely to happen?
In other words, I usually work with couples to say, can you find, not usually among Christians, can you find a common ground? Can you find a third religion that you'll both be active in? Because my experience is, the Catholic marries the Protestant and neither of them go anymore.
Right.
And I suspect in interfaith marriages, that's a very big possibility too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we don't encourage someone to find something else, but we do. I do quote the statistics, which aren't really good. That when not when and it it does increase the divorce rate. There's another reason that could of something that could get in between the couple. That's number one. Number two is that in terms of Jewish identity, if the couple is saying, well, it doesn't matter that the one of us isn't Jewish, we will still have Jewish children. Well, the statistics demonstrate that a couple that marries a Jew and a non-Jew, and the non-Jew doesn't convert, they have somewhere between a 1 and 10% chance of the children growing up with a Jewish identity. And they have 0 chance statistically of Jewishly identified grandchildren. Because this is not a majority Jewish country. The polls are all over the place. So
Pastor Neil, actually, I have a half brother that's Jewish. My father remarried and married a Jewish woman, so I have a half brother who was raised Jewish. He married a disciple of Christ. And so their 2 daughters, who are 20 and 17, were raised with both traditions. And it was basically, so they celebrate Hanukkah and Christmas at the same time. So, and my brother and his wife came up with, well, they should know both of their histories and both of their backgrounds, and when they become adults, decide which is best suited for them. And they haven't made that choice yet. They still both celebrate all the traditions.
And that's often what happens. They either celebrate both things, don't really, as the pastor was saying, don't really have a common thread with a community that they feel whole in, right? And they often end up with nothing. They often, in America, you can just be American, which wasn't true in a lot of other places. So
I think that's the case in Christianity and Protestantism, and clearly. But we're no longer the place, and maybe that's different in Judaism, but we're no longer the place people go for weddings. I have done one wedding in my 7 years for a member in the church.
Wow.
One. I have done lots of weddings in different places. Beach, backyard, castle.
Right. Castle, I like it.
But I've done one wedding for a member in the church, but it was kind of without identifying who it was kind of a convenience. And that sounds more harsh than I mean it. But, finally her mother said to her, you can get married in the church and a lot of these issues would be a lot easier when you have the reception in the hall.
Yeah.
And that person's membership shows that lack of commitment. I want to say that carefully because I'm still hopeful for them. But, so we're really not the place. The place I served in Pennsylvania, we would have 5 weddings on a weekend. It was a different kind of, but I wonder if they still do, because I think it's really dropped off in the Christian church, having weddings in churches.
Yeah, well, the thing is that it's actually traditional to have Jewish weddings outside anyway.
That's my impression, that so having a wedding at the reception site is not a big deal for Jews, right?
Exactly. Not at all. Not at all. It's, and they'll often happen at sundown, either on a Saturday or Sunday. Saturday, we can do Havdalah as part of the ceremony, and it's really quite pretty.
All right, Neil, why don't we do a wrap and we'll stop the recording if you'd like to do a little wrap up, and then we'll stop the recording. Okay.
Well, I think, I hope what you discovered tonight is that at a wedding, everything is symbolic. And my rule of thumb is that, yes, there'll be things that are symbolic for the community and for the Jewish people as a whole, and those we try to keep consistent. But we also try and make it each couple's wedding and have things that are symbolic for them there too, because it's their wedding. And I want them to be able to remember that as their day as well.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording here.
Odavo shalom aleinu, Odavo shalom aleinu, Yavo shalom aleinu ve'al kulam.